Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're starting with something pretty bold, this global journey towards gender equality. It's not just for women. It really, truly matters for everyone.
Absolutely.
Especially now, With all this rapid change, tech breakthroughs, geopolitical shifts, economic uncertainty everywhere, unlocking all human talent. It's just critical, not a nice to have.
It's essential for resilience, for innovation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our mission today isn't just like reading a report summary. We want to dig into the surprising forces, the paradoxes shaping gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a deep dive into the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2025. And this thing, it's built on a ton of different sources.
Yeah, it's really comprehensive. International organizations, executive surveys.
Unique data from LinkedIn, the World Bank.
Yeah.
It gives this broad benchmark of where things stand globally. So think of this as your insider's guide, the real story behind the stats.
Right. And it's important to know what this Global Gender Gap Index actually is. It's the longest running one, started back in 2006.
Yeah.
And its main job isn't to rank countries by how developed they are overall. It specifically measures the gaps.
Gaps, okay.
Yeah, the gaps between men and women in access to resources and opportunities. It focuses on outcomes, you see, not just policies on paper.
Outcomes, got it.
And it's measuring gender equality specifically, not just, say, women's empowerment, which is related but different.
So it's about the difference, the disparity within a country, not necessarily how wealthy or healthy that country is overall. That's a key point.
Precisely.
And what areas does it zero in on? What are the components?
It breaks parity down into 4 key dimensions or sub-indexes. You've got economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment.
Right.
So economic looks at, are women in the workforce? What are the wages like? Are they in leadership roles?
Makes sense.
Educational is literacy, school enrollment, university, all levels. Health and survival looks at sex ratio at birth. Are baby girls valued? And healthy life expectancy.
Then political.
That's about women in parliament, in ministerial jobs, and has the country ever had a female head of state?
Okay, that's clear. So let's get to the headline numbers for 2025. What's the global picture?
Well, across all 148 economies they looked at, the report says 68.8% of the overall gender gap is closed.
68.8%.
And if you just look at the 100 countries they've tracked continuously since 2006, it's slightly higher, 69.0% closed.
Okay, 68.8% closed. That, it sounds like progress, but I suspect there's a but coming when you factor in the speed.
There is. There definitely is. Globally, parity has increased by 4.8 percentage points since 2006. That's something.
Right.
However, and this is the big, at the current rate of change, it's still projected to take 123 years to close the gap completely.
123 years.
Wow. Yeah, that is better than last year's estimate. It shaved off a decade, actually. But still, 123 years is obviously nowhere near global development goals.
123 years.
Yeah.
That's generations away. It's not just a number, is it? It means generations missing out on the full benefits of, everyone's talent. What's the real drag of that, economically, socially?
It's huge. The report really implies this isn't just about fairness, though it is. It's a massive economic inefficiency.
Right.
Every year we wait, we're basically leaving money, trillions, potentially on the table. Underused talent, lack of diverse thinking in solving problems.
That affects everything. Innovation, stability.
Everything.
Okay, that's definitely sobering. Let's dive into those 4 dimensions you mentioned. Maybe start with the apparent good juice. Health and survival, educational attainment.
Yeah, those definitely show the highest scores. Health and survival has closed 96.2% of its gap.
Pretty close.
And educational attainment is at 95.1% close.
Okay, so we're almost there in those areas. That seems, genuinely positive for human capital, right?
It does, but there's a fascinating nuance here. Even with that high 96.2% score, progress in health and survival has actually gone backwards slightly since 2006 by 0.2 percentage points.
Really? How?
It seems to be down to a decline in healthy life expectancy for women compared to men, even though the sex ratio at birth, thankfully, has improved in most places.
So women might live longer, but the healthy part of that longer life relative to men isn't keeping pace.
Exactly. It's a crucial detail. And for education, while it's nearly closed, progress has been really slow, only a 0.2 percentage point gain since 2006. That pushes the timeline for full parity out to 17 years.
17 years just for education parity. Wow. Okay, so quality of later years is key for health. Now, We've seen good numbers, relatively speaking, in health and education, but the economy, that's often where the really stubborn gaps lie, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the picture for economic participation and opportunity?
You're right. This is where the gap widens significantly. Only 61.0% of the economic gap is closed globally.
61.0%. That's a big drop from the 90%. What's the trend? Is it moving, and what's driving it or holding it back?
Well, it has narrowed since 2006 by 5.6 percentage points. So there's progress.
Yeah.
But at this pace, we're looking at another 135 years for economic parity.
135 years. Oof.
Yeah. Now, there have been some bright spots within that. We've seen quite significant jumps in women in senior leadership roles. That's up 17.5 percentage points.
That's good.
In women getting higher education, that's up 16.1 points. So the talent pipeline at the top end of education and entering senior roles seems to be improving.
Right, but that raises a question, doesn't it? Education is up, more women getting degrees, some rise in senior roles, but overall economic parity is still so far off. Is it just a pipeline lag, or are there other barriers kicking in later?
That's the million-dollar question, really, and we'll definitely circle back to that leaky pipeline idea. But before we do, what about political empowerment? This one always gets attention, and I have to say, the numbers surprised me too. The biggest jump since 2006? A 9.0 percentage point increase.
Yes, that's the most improvement of any sub-index.
Okay.
But it's still the one with the biggest remaining gap, right?
Yeah.
Only 22.9% closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, fastest progress, but still. 162 years projected to reach parity. It's a real paradox.
162 years for political parity. So where's the progress coming from?
We're seeing gains in women in governing cabinets. That's up 12.6 percentage points. And in legislative bodies like parliaments, up 14.7 points.
Oh.
But get this. Nearly half of all the economies tracked still haven't had a female head of state in the last 50 years.
Half.
Yeah. Though you do have exceptions like Bangladesh and Iceland who've achieved parity on that specific indicator.
Okay. Fastest progress, longest road. That political dimension is fascinating. Now, this is where, as you said, it gets really interesting looking at regions, because this progress, it's not happening evenly everywhere, is it?
Not at all. The regional stories are incredibly varied. You've got Northern America, which ranks first overall, 75.8% closed.
Right at the top.
But they've made almost zero progress on economic parity since 2006. It's stalled.
Huh? Interesting.
Then look at Latin America and the Caribbean. They're third overall at 74.5%, but they are the fastest advancing region since 2006. They've gained 8.6 percentage points.
Wow.
And their projected time to parity, just 57 years. Much faster than the global average.
What's driving that in Latin America?
They have a really strong track record, relatively speaking, on female political leadership. 15 economies there have had a woman as head of state. And get this, Nicaragua and Mexico, they've actually achieved full parliamentary parity.
Full parity, equal numbers of men and women.
Equal numbers. It's a remarkable achievement. It really shows it's possible.
Definitely something to learn from there. Okay, what about Europe?
Europe's second overall, 75.1% closed. They're projected at 76 years to parity. And they lead globally on political empowerment specifically at 35.4% closed.
Right.
Then you go further south. Southern Asia is 7th, 64.6% closed. They struggle particularly with economic participation, only 40.6%. But you have outliers like Bangladesh, which ranks 24th globally, quite high for the region.
Right. And the Middle East and North Africa.
That's the lowest ranked region, 8th. At 61.7% closed. And this is significant, their political empowerment score has actually tripled since 2006.
Fair bold.
Yeah, it's still low, only 10.5% now, but that rate of change is notable. The UAE is leading the region there at 37.2% political parity.
A big leap from a low base, but it shows movement. Okay. And Sub-Saharan Africa.
Sub-Saharan Africa is 6th overall, 68.0% closed, but it has a huge range within the region. Namibia is way up there at 8th globally.
Wow.
While Chad is down at 146th. So massive variation. The region as a whole has made decent progress on economic participation since 2006, up 4.8 percentage points. And Rwanda stands out as the only economy there with full parliamentary parity.
Like Nicaragua and Mexico. Interesting. So these wildly different speeds and focus areas.
Yeah.
What can we take away from that? It seems like there's no single path, right? Progress can pop up in unexpected places.
Absolutely. Context matters hugely. Policy choices matter. Cultural factors matter. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. Okay, let's dig into some of those underlying factors now, the dynamics behind these numbers. What's going on with labor markets, leadership pipelines? You mentioned this earlier.
Yeah, this is really critical. The report talks about an untapped return on education investment.
Meaning?
Meaning women are actually graduating from university and tertiary education at higher rates than men globally.
Right.
But they're still underrepresented in the workforce overall, only 41.2% participation. And especially in top leadership, only 29.5% of senior managers who have tertiary education are women.
So the skills are there, the education is there, but it's not translating into participation in leadership at the same rate.
Exactly. It points to real systemic inefficiencies. Something's blocking that translation of skill into economic engagement.
Okay, let's unpack this leaky pipeline idea. Women are educated, prepared, but falling out before the top. What's causing the leak?
Well, a few things seem to be at play. One is that progress specifically for women in top management seems to have actually slowed down after 2022.
Oh, interesting. A post-pandemic effect.
Possibly. And in some sectors, you're seeing more gains right at the very top than in middle management, which could actually hurt the pipeline long term. You need that middle rung.
Right. You need the feeder pool.
Precisely. And then there's the role of career breaks. This is stark. Women are 55.2% more likely than men to take a career break.
Over 50% more likely.
Wow, and those breaks are longer too. Average 19.6 months for women versus 13.9 months for men.
And the reason?
Overwhelmingly, it's linked to parenting responsibilities.
Right, the care economy.
Exactly. And the report notes that the care economy, while it's pretty resilient to things like automation, it's still massively underleveraged as a way to keep women connected to the workforce.
That makes so much sense. These aren't just individual choices, are they?
Yeah.
They're baked into how we structure work, how we value or don't value care.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, if we actually treated the care economy as vital infrastructure, how different would things look? Maybe our whole definition of productive work needs a rethink.
That's a profound point.
Okay, moving to political leadership. We talked about the gains, but also that huge remaining gap. And you mentioned women are often missing from key cabinet roles, economy, infrastructure, defense.
Yes, that distribution is skewed.
So what does that actually mean for policy, for where the money goes?
It has really tangible economic consequences. Those roles heavily influence fiscal policy, where investments are made, how resources are allocated nationally.
Right.
And while women do lead a majority of parliamentary committees specifically focused on gender equality, 100 out of 161, which is interesting.
Huh. So they lead the gender committees.
Yes, but their overall share of legislative power, like parliamentary speakers, is still under a third. So that uneven power distribution really shapes national priorities and spending.
It's not just about having laws on the books then, is it? You touched on this, the implementation gap.
Ah, yes. This is crucial.
So having a law is one thing, but actually making it happen, that seems like a huge hurdle. What does this gap tell us? Is it about enforcement, resources, culture?
It's likely all of the above. What the report finds is that across almost all 148 economies, the supportive frameworks, that means the actual policies, the budgets, the institutions needed to enforce the laws, they lag behind the legal frameworks themselves.
So the laws exist, but the machinery to make them work doesn't.
In many cases, yes. There are only 5 exceptions listed: Belize, Bangladesh, Canada, Jordan, and the UK, where the supportive framework score is actually higher than the legal one.
Suggesting they have better infrastructure relative to their law.
Exactly. It suggests they might be better equipped to actually promote equality in practice. But for most countries, this gap raises a big question. How effective can laws be if the budget, the institutions, the political will isn't really there to back them up?
Laws become symbolic rather than transformative.
Potentially, yes. It limits the real-world impact.
Okay, a law is only as good as its enforcement. Makes sense. Finally, let's zoom out a bit. The broader global picture. How do things like trade shifts, geopolitical tensions, how do they play into gender parity? This feels important, but maybe less discussed.
It's definitely an emerging challenge and potentially a big one. You see, for decades, women in many lower and middle-income countries benefited quite a bit from global trade integration.
How so?
It helped move them into the formal economy, into better-paid jobs, often in export sectors like manufacturing or agriculture.
Oh.
But now, with global trade integration potentially slowing down or even reversing in some areas, those gains are at risk.
Right. Trade wars, supply chain shifts.
Exactly. One estimate in the report suggests that just a 1% contraction in global trade volume could put something like 4.5 million jobs held by women at risk.
4.5 million jobs. Wow.
And the bigger picture here is that when these kinds of economic shocks happen, the negative effects on women often last longer and are harder to undo. They can worsen the pre-existing gaps in pay, assets, wealth.
So global instability can disproportionately harm women's economic progress.
It appears so, yes. It's a significant risk factor to watch.
What a well, incredibly detailed and, yeah, sometimes sobering picture of gender parity in 2025. Just to recap, we've seen this really complex landscape, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Big gains in education, nearly closed gaps there, and in health, though with nuances, but then these really persistent, deep gaps in economic power, in political voice.
And the timelines are just daunting. 123 years overall, 135 for economic, 162 for political.
Generations.
Yeah.
And all of this is interacting with global trends like trade, like the structure of our economies and the care gap. It's clear progress is happening, but that road to full parity is still incredibly long.
Very long.
So for everyone listening, as you think about this deep dive, maybe reflect on how these big global forces, the future of trade, this implementation gap inequality laws, how might they be playing out maybe quietly in the places where you live and work? What unspoken assumptions about talent, about leadership, about whose work counts? What might be holding back progress in your own communities, your own organizations? Something to chew on.